Sorry, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. It is Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. We are here in the second floor of the Commissioner's office at our Administrative Services Building for Larimer County in Fort Collins. And we are here in the Commissioner's conference room for a work session with our Code Compliance Department. And I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Chadwick-Nally, Chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Glad to be here today, and I welcome you, and along with my colleagues, Larimer County Commissioner John Kafalis and Larimer County Commissioner Kristen Stevens. We are excited about this topic today. Also at the table today is our County Manager, Lorenda Volker. I just left our Assistant County Manager, so I know she won't be here today. And we have a lot of people in the room. But I will go ahead and just direct this over to Rebecca Everett, our Community Development Director, and I know she'll introduce our wonderful Amy White of our Code Compliance Manager and the Supervisor. Sorry. And thank you. I know this is a really important topic, and we have a lot of ground to cover today, so thank you.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. We're excited to follow up on our initial conversation from our August work session where we presented at a high level the findings of our code compliance assessment, which has been in the works for many months now. And we're excited to review the details and findings of that assessment in greater detail today. This work session will be followed with one-on-one conversations with each commissioner to answer any questions or have additional discussions about any of the detailed recommendations or policy choices contained within the report. And then we will revisit with the full board at our November 13th SIPR work session for final guidance. There's a lot of substance in the report and in the presentation today. We have about a 20-minute presentation, and we're hoping to cover all of the slides and get through the full content before fielding questions so that we can have a complete conversation about the various policy choices and potential operational changes or improvements that are recommended in the report. Finally, I want to reiterate kudos for the whole team, for Amy White, our co-compliance supervisor, and the co-compliance team, many of whom are in the room today, for their input, their reflection, and their analysis that fed into this report and really informed a lot of the final recommendations. So thank you to that team. As a quick reminder, and we covered this in August, but as a refresher, the last time the code compliance practices and operations were reviewed was in 2005, and there was an assessment done at that time. And the recommendations of that assessment were implemented to a great degree. And now, after over 15 years of implementation, we have a great opportunity to reflect, see how our community has evolved, how our organization's needs have evolved, and see what else, what other best practices exist that we could be implementing. In 2022, we worked with a consultant, Clarion Associates, to assess best practices, help with peer community interviews, understand our priorities, evaluate our staffing levels and our resources, and help to generate recommendations. We then took the content that Clarion prepared and reviewed it and revised it into the final report that you see today. In some cases, we've identified opportunities for improvement that we've already begun implementation, that were kind of the no-brainers, and we'll highlight some of those today that we're already working on. There are other recommendations that require some policy conversations that may have trade-offs, that may have some key choices that are embedded within those recommendations. And so today's goal is to provide an overall view of our current practices, what we've learned from other communities, the high-level recommendations of the report, answer clarifying questions, and get initial feedback, knowing that we'll have more time to dig in greater detail in future conversations. So now I'll pass it off to Amy White, our co-compliance supervisor, who will walk through the report and the key findings within it.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. The Code Compliance team greatly appreciates your interest and your support. So as Rebecca mentioned, over the last couple years, we've been working to identify some of the places where we could use some best practices. We chose to interview Adams County, Arapahoe, Boulder, Douglas, Jefferson, and Summit, and we interviewed both their enforcement staff and their county attorney from each of these counties. And basically what we found is, comparatively speaking, we're already doing a lot of what other counties are doing. A couple key takeaways. Next slide, please. From the folks that we interviewed, only Boulder County actually enforces both the land use code and the building code, similar to us. And they do it for the same reason. They have found that it's more effective and efficient to look at a property comprehensively. Douglas County, as far as we know, is the only county in Colorado that has deputized their code compliance staff, and they are able to issue summons and tickets for zoning code violations only. So they can't go out and do a speeding ticket or whatever. It's strictly zoning code. Summit County uses a recording system for notice of violations for building codes so that somebody else's problem doesn't get passed on to a potential new buyer, right? We hear quite frequently, why didn't somebody tell me this? And we don't have a good answer for that, but we're hoping that by utilizing this same system, so recording building code violations with the clerk and recorder, that we can help the public gain that knowledge when property transfers. And then the other takeaway that we found is that we're the only county that does the comprehensive research. It's unique to Larimer County. And the reason we do that is, again, we feel that it increases the efficiency so that we can look at a parcel and see if it's got engineering issues, if it's got floodplain issues, land use. So we look at a property comprehensively, and the research allows us to do that. We use a cooperative or facilitative approach, which means we try to educate people about what the regulations are, and we have found that more often than not, once folks understand what the violations are and why, they're more likely to come into compliance. And we joke sometimes that we smile people into compliance because we don't have many tools, but what we do have, we use pretty effectively. As we mentioned previously, we do have a high level of collaboration with several other departments, jurisdictions, railroad companies. And then again, the in-depth research property, we just think is a good practice. So you've seen this graph before. What I wanted to point out in today's hearing or presentation is, even though we're tasked with enforcing these, the majority of our time is spent with building, land use, the rubbish ordinance, floodplain issues. Right-of-way has become one of our major enforcement areas at this point. And then, as you know, the short-term rental enforcement has kind of increased dramatically.
Can I ask, you want me to save the questions for the end? Okay, I'll wait for the end then, sorry. I'll mentally park a lot,
Okay.
sorry.
And to go along with this, we thought it would be interesting to show you the staffing levels through the years. So we took this back to 2005. This does not include the supervisor. There's only been one supervisor from the beginning. But the blue line are the inspectors. The purple are technicians, so they're the ones that help do the research. And then in 2016, we started the specialist program, which is they do some of the easier building code violations and help with the overflow. And then you see the temporary positions there. That kind of came along with the short-term rental, the rush of short-term rentals and vacation homes, because we needed to do the research on those prior to the planning application to know how many bedrooms were legal. This graph shows the cases by inspector. So Chad is the green, I was the orange, Tony's the purple, Alan is the turquoise, and then Hannah is the dark purple. And what we wanted to show you here is, even though Alan didn't start with us until 2020, he's still working on some of the cases from back in 2016, right? So those are those big messy cases that need several different steps to go through to get them into, yeah. Okay, next. So then we wanted to show you some of our before and afters. This was a rubbish cleanup. So it's through the rubbish ordinance. We obtain a warrant through the court, and we have 10 days to execute that warrant. You recently helped us with an order and assessment, so that funds then the cleanup. And you can see there's a little bit of debris left, but for the most part, it was a dramatic. And we've done 2 this year so far. These are some examples of our illegal businesses. In the top left is a current case that Tony's been working on. Thanks, Chad. This property has several violations. It's got an illegal retail, it's got illegal boat rental, it's got an illegal U-Haul business, several building code violations, and we recently filed this one in county court to seek it. Yeah, so that one is a complicated one. The one on the top right was a case from a couple years ago, but it was also an illegal business where they were dumping chemical waste into the river behind there. And then they also needed building permits for those cargo containers. Tony was able to get that one resolved. And then the bottom center is one of Chad's current cases. It's a trash hauling business up north of town that's operating illegally. And it too is on our list to get into county court soon. These are examples of some of our building code violations. You all might remember, or maybe the left-hand side was the Mullenbrook property that was probably one of the biggest cases that we've ever done, and we eventually took that one down to the foundation. And then the one on the right was a structure that was transported from the city downtown Fort Collins and placed up in Berthoud in 2 pieces, and it has been exposed so long that there's asbestos contamination. We have since taken care of this one as well, but those are some of the different types of cases that we deal with on a daily basis. This graph is showing you the number of cases per year. The blue is the total number of cases. The amber color is cases that have been closed from previous years. And then the orange on the far left are cases that were open and closed in the same year. You'll notice in 2020, the purple bar, and that was as a result of the Cameron Peak fire. Those were the damage assessments that we went out and did. And then we tracked those as code compliance cases, even though we didn't open up a case necessarily. So that's why that year is a little out of whack. But basically, you can see that we're pretty steady with the number of cases, and we're right on track with that for this year as well. This graph is trying to show the average number of days to close a case. As I said, rubbish, the right-of-way, floodplain, land use code, and then the building takes the longest, but we can't do building permits till all the other processes have been completed or they've received approval or whatever. So building generally is the last one to get addressed, which is why it takes the longest to get closed. So we'll touch a little bit more on this further down, but back after the first assessment in 2005, we came up with the priority rating system. It helps the inspectors to focus on the most critical issues. Cases are assigned a priority between A and D, A being usually those that are life safety. Most of those involve, like our International Property Maintenance Code, where there's structural issues or whatever. And then D is, yep, we know they're out there, but they're not a priority for us. Majority of the cases right now are lumped into the priority B, both in the land use and the building. And while reviewed periodically by the BOCC, this priority rating system has never been substantially revised since its inception. So we have some ideas on how we could help focus. So now, these are some of the operational changes that Rebecca had mentioned that we're already underway. We're already doing some of these. Expanding our legal enforcement tools. So use of county court and then use of the stipulated agreements. A stipulated agreement is a document that we prepare with the county attorney's office, and it lays out the facts of the case. It provides all the violations. The owner then signs it, and it streamlines it so that we don't have to go to a hearing at any point. It's already agreed to, and the property owner actually signs it. It gets filed with the court, and if they miss one of those deadlines, again, we can just do a motion for the court to start imposing fines immediately, so we don't have to go through all the initial steps. They've already been done. And county court, we found with the short-term rental, the illegal short-term rentals, that it has been a very effective tool. Once they get served with the summons, they either contact the county attorney's office and cease advertising, or they come in to the planning division and start through the process. So it's been very effective. Another one that we would like to use is the building violation recording process, similar to what Summit County does. So once a building violation, and this would only apply to residential and commercial, so no utility or pole barns or anything. Once we've verified that there is a building code violation, we would like to record a notice of violation with the clerk and recorder so it does notify the folks. And again, Summit County has found this very helpful. The process has been approved since 2010, but due to staffing limitations, we've never been able to actually enforce it. Here's a graph that's trying to show that bottom line are permits that would be eligible for the building violation recording process. And then the upper line are ones that are either currently in just the standard code compliance, or they also could be subject to a recording process as well. So you can see there's several permits out there that are eligible for this. And this slide is just really to show you, just to inform you. So currently, once we establish that there's a violation, we send out what we call our 15-day letter. It notifies people, says, please contact us so that we can explain, tell you your next steps. And then we follow that up by a 30-day letter. Sometimes people blow us off on that first 15-day letter, and we'd like to shorten up the 30-day notice to 15-day because we feel if they're not going to work with us, why give them additional time with the 30 days? So we'd like to shorten that up to 15 days. So here's the meat of what we're asking for. So here's some of the policy decisions that we're asking your guidance on, and look forward to future discussions. But as we've mentioned, addressing illegal businesses is something that we've struggled with for several years. And as you all know, after driving around with some of the inspectors, there's several of them out there. And there's some different considerations that sometimes there's no path forward for these on their current property, right? They're either on a floodplain or the parcel isn't big enough. And so if there's no path forward or there are significant life safety issues, are those some of the ones that we should start taking a closer look at, maybe giving them X amount of days to shut down and help them find a different spot where it would be legal? And obviously one of the holdbacks is it can be seen as harsh or overstepping of the government, so by the public. So we would just need to be wary of that. So that's something we look forward to visiting. We're not asking for a yes or no on this business registration. We're asking if you all would like us to delve a little bit deeper into this and bring back some data. We feel it would allow a county to, state statute currently allows the county, you can require a license, but there's no fee involved. It would allow code compliance and other county departments to better track business activity. We think it would reduce the number of businesses that do start up illegally. It was recently a CCI priority, which is the statute that allows counties to require that registration at this point. So they also see it as an important issue. Next. And then currently our land use code states that registration is encouraged, but it is not required. Provides a mechanism to collect the baseline information, potentially prevent future violations, bring current violations into compliance, and reduce those compatibility complaints that we get and that you all are getting. One of the other things we would like your input on, and this has worked quite effectively with the short-term rentals as well. If there's a building code violation out there, past BCC direction has been to go ahead and get planning approval and then let the building code violation kind of work its way through. We have found with the short-term rentals that requiring those building code violations to get cleared up as well helps with people getting the leverage that we need to get those finished. Those probably account for some of those expired permits that are out there that once it goes away, it just everybody kind of forgets about it. So that's something we would like to see if we could make sure that those building code violations get taken care of before planning approval is provided. So here's where we're getting into the priority ratings again. And again, it's more of a nuance. What we'd like to do, and then come back with you with what we find, is to look at both those priority Bs in both the land use and the building, and maybe do a B1 and a B2. So B1 would involve life safety issues, so an as-built basement, right? So somebody's finished a basement, there's bedrooms in there, there's not proper egress, there's no smoke alarms. Those are important, more so than a pole barn that may not meet setbacks out in the middle of nowhere. So we'd like to take a look at those and come up with a 1 and a 2 for the building code. And then for the land use code, same thing. Depending on where we land with the illegal businesses, we may want to do a B1 and a B2 in that category as well. So here's the priority B for the building code. And as you can see, it's it's not very specific on what we're looking for. So we'd like to take a look at that and see if we can refine it. This is showing what the priority case ratings are in our current cases. So the line that goes out furthest is the priority B building code violations. So you can see that they get lumped together there. And then the next one is the priority B land use code violations as well. So you can see that things are getting lumped in. And this is a rather hard graph to read. So if you have any questions on that moving forward, we can certainly discuss those. Another area that we are seeking some guidance and some direction, currently for the as-built permits, we don't collect any additional fee. If a owner has done the work themselves, we collect what we call a penalty fee. So it's half of the original building permit fee. However, it takes staff the same amount of time to do any as-built to get it through the system. And so for just purposes of our discussion this afternoon, we average 166 as-built permits in the last couple years. So if we imposed a $100 fee, that would be an additional $16,633 that we would bring in. Of those 166, only 63 are charged that penalty fee. The average penalty fee itself is $430, which is an average of about $28,000. So currently, that's the only income that the Code Compliance Department is gathering. And we're right about that. In the last couple years, we've been above average. And again, as I said, right now, we're right about where we were in the last couple years. And then the last thing I want to touch on are some of the emerging compliance issues that we see out and about. Obviously, the dramatic increase in the short-term rental enforcement has been significant. With the passage of the new tiny homes, unpermitted tiny homes will now be something that we'll be able to enforce. I know engineering has talk about grading permits out there. We get a lot of complaints about grading permits, but there's nothing we can do at this point. Outdoor lighting regulations are out and about. And then also, you all are familiar with the mobile home community outreach that we've been doing with the Housing Stability Manager. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Amy. So just to wrap us up here, and then we welcome discussion and questions from you all. The some of the key findings of this report are that we are a leader among our county peers throughout Colorado. A lot of the practices we're utilizing now in our general approach is seen as an example in other communities, and there are still some best practices that we're not fully utilizing or some lessons to learn from other communities. And we're hoping to look at ways that we can improve our efficiency, but also our effectiveness of how we get properties into compliance and how we uphold public health and safety in our community in the most reasonable and effective way possible. So we look forward to additional meetings to discuss and a follow-up at the November 13th work session with all of you. And, we've put out a couple questions for discussion today, but really we'll look to you to go in whatever direction you'd like with this content, and are seeking your feedback and happy to provide additional information or hear from you what other information would be helpful in those follow-up conversations. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Amy, for the excellent presentation and all the information that you've kind of given us to kind of prepare for this. This is a lot of a big issue in our county, and I know we're not alone. I think this is an issue for a lot of counties. Talking just actually with another commissioner this morning and last night about some rubbish issues. So I will see if I have my question, but I'll ask Commissioner Cafals first if you have questions or about this presentation, and then we'll see if Commissioner Stevens has as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Amy White, Rebecca Everett. I do have a few questions. Maybe I'll pose a couple at a time, and if time allows, we can get through all of them. And I appreciate the one-on-one session. I think that'll be very helpful. Certainly want to begin by reaffirming the statement that I think Rebecca and others have made. Thank you to the team, the code compliance folks. I am familiar with that situation with the pink trucks. I think we're overdue for another ride, perhaps. With that said, I mean, I totally appreciate, and Eric is here, the building code folks, and the collaboration with the various departments, divisions, and so forth. I think my first question, give me a moment, please. I had a couple of overarching questions. Well, let me start with this, and then the others will come back to me. But regarding as-built permits, I think I understand what the ask is, whereby if something was built without a permit or it wasn't inspected properly, and the person who did that work lives in that house, in order to move forward with any kind of land use approval, well, there are two issues there. There's whether or not we would charge, or maybe we're already charging a fee there. If you could clarify that. And then I know there's the other issue, which relates to, we typically put it as a condition of approval if there's a land use approval matter, if we determine that something is as-built. So maybe the first part would be, if you could explain that fee thing again. And I guess all the years that I've been here and we've talked about as-built permits, I've never quite exactly understood what that means. So we determine that something is non-conforming or not built up to code, and then we say, you got to fix this. If Eric or you could explain that, I would like to know.
Jonah?
I don't want Eric to get off too easy. So basically, just a quick clarification on what we're considering with regard to additional costs to cover some of the costs. And then how does it actually work when we identify through all this research that we're doing that, somebody built something that is not conforming or doesn't, meet the building codes or safety inspections, and then they have to go back and fix it, or how that works?
So I'll try to explain
Thank you, sir.
Eric Freed, building official. I'll try to explain the as-built process. Just something our code compliance department developed some years ago. if it's work that requires a building permit, the normal course of events is first you submit an application with plans, our plans examiners review it, make whatever corrections are needed, you get a permit, you start building it, we inspect it all as we go along, you get your certificate of occupancy, et cetera. But people don't always get permits when they're supposed to, either they don't know, or maybe they were the third owner down the road and someone before them finished the basement without a permit. So if we took a very hard line, which we decided wouldn't be very effective, we would tell people to, for instance, remove all the finished material in the basement down to the studs and the rough plumbing and wiring so we could see it all. Well, nobody wants to do that. That's a big expense and it's a problem. So we evolved a way, we don't make people do that, but an as-built permit basically is an after-the-fact permit. The work has already been done, did not get a permit, so we're issuing a permit after the fact. So rather than make them tear everything down, we require them to hire a master electrician to check the wiring and give us their opinion if they believe it's safe and up to code. We require them to hire a master plumber if plumbing was done for the same reason. If there was anything structurally involved, then we require them to hire an engineer to verify that it's structurally sound. We don't require that in a basement finish because it's non-structural framing. It's just, infill. It's not bearing any load or anything like that. But we also then go through and do an inspection to see if there's anything we note that's not to code. So if it's a new bedroom they built, let's say in addition to the house, we'll check to see that there's an emergency escape window, smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, all that stuff. And if we find corrections, they have to make corrections. It's not just like a pass, it's an after-the-fact permit, so everything is approved.
Thank you, Eric. That's very helpful in terms of understanding the actual mechanics of how that works. And I would assume that the homeowner would be the one who is paying the additional costs for example, if we need to have an electrician come in and check the wiring. Is that correct, sir?
Correct, and that's one reason we don't apply the penalty fee if the owner's not the one who did the work. Technically, if work's been done without a permit, we can impose a penalty fee. And we'll do that if the owner is the one who did the work, but if you're the second or third owner down the road, we don't want to penalize you. You're already spending money on an engineer, electrician, plumber, et cetera.
So one last question on this, and then I'll defer to others, and I'll collect my thoughts. So in terms of the fee, are what we considering is that an additional fee could apply to the new homeowner if they didn't do the work, but they need to fix it up?
That's correct, Commissioner. The coordination of all the different tradespeople that we need the certification from, the electrician, possible plumber, the engineer, getting all those documents put together is very time intensive, and sometimes people just don't understand, so there's a lot of hand-holding, there's a lot of educating, there's a lot of work that goes into that.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stevens, did you have questions?
Well, thank you for the presentation and appreciate all your work. So I'll start with a question that I had as Commissioner Kafalis was coming up, and then I'll go through some of the questions that I have. So I feel like we should have a fee for our services. So, and I understand that person's going through an expensive process to get the as-built, but there's usually like a reason they're doing it, like they're converting to a short-term rental, so there's going to be a benefit if they can lease out another room. There's a benefit if you're selling your house and you can sell it as a 5-bedroom versus a 4-bedroom. So they're almost, in a lot of cases, there's a benefit for that person to go through that so they will see a financial gain from going through the process. So I guess I don't want us to do work without, especially work where we do have the ability to charge a fee that covers some of our services. So I don't want us, as we look at belt tightening and, potential, ballot initiatives on the horizon, I do think that, we do have to look at sort of charging for the work that we do and being realistic about it. And where we can charge, I think we need to. I mean, not in any kind of, not to penalize people, not in any kind of extensive way, but to cover our costs. Mm-hmm. So then let's see. With regard to illegal businesses, I get the trickiness of it because Amy and I have been working on some issues, and there is sort of, when they're in a place where they're not causing as much harm and not, in unstable situations. I mean, it does feel like, it can feel like overreach, I think. So I think that, I guess I would have to think a little bit more about how to do that. Certainly, always life safety kind of issues are crucial. But there's some, I will say, I feel like there's some gray area in the illegal business. I mean, I don't mind requiring a license, but honestly, like, looks like we can't charge a fee for it. There again, I'm all into, like, I mean, we're gonna set up a new process where somebody has to get a license and we can't recoup any of those dollars. I feel like we might need to go, if that was a legislative change, it didn't go quite far enough.
Yeah, right.
And so that's how I'm kind of feeling about that situation. I don't want to start something that feels like, let's hire a new FTE to do business registration, but guess what? There's not going to be any kind of, ability to recoup any of those costs. That feels weird. I don't know why that was.
Yeah, there could be possibly down the road, but it's a lot of work to get those folks through the planning process. There has been talk of double feeing planning applications, right? But then you're getting into thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's a tricky field.
So I'm not opposed to it, but I'd like to figure out a way we could do that without that being just a cost to the county. Let's see, building code violations during the planning process. I had that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that, there again, that seems like something that makes sense to do it that way. I guess I just worry about all the, like, as we say yes to things, what the dollar amount is. And, there again, looking at your chart of all the additional stuff you've done over the past several years, I'm cognizant of the fact that there's not a lot of space. It's not like you guys are, have a lot of free time, right? I mean, you're constantly busy taking care of these issues. And so I don't want to put more on your plate without having help to do that. The priority ratings, that seems like a pretty easy switch, and it might help to differentiate, kind of like you said, between maybe a shed versus a place where people are living or doing business. And then, yeah, so I think I answered all the questions so those are just some of the things. I guess for me, like, I want to support, I appreciate the work you do. It makes for better communities. It makes for better neighbors. It's really important. And I don't want us to take on more than we can. And I do want us to be able to, so if we need to, if at some point we need to hire somebody, that's fine. But I mean, I think that making sure that we're trying to figure out a way to pay for that person with some of these additional areas would be good. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, for your questions. Again, Amy, excellent presentation. And thank you to the entire code compliance staff. I see most of you in the room, and thanks to, I'm sure, everyone. This has been a big thing to tackle, but it's something we've been talking about and been waiting to kind of have all the information here so we can have this conversation. And I want to thank Leslie Ellis and Rebecca for supporting them as they worked on this. I had a first question, just because I got some comments and questions. Back to the slide with all the things that you do and how it's increased on the current practices. I've gotten a lot of thank yous. Like, we really aren't the ones doing it, but a lot of thank yous, especially from folks on the Weld County side or others. Thank you for taking over. And I'm like, we didn't. This is the Lerner, or NOCO Humane. And I just wanted to, obviously a lot of people saw the need and are thankful. And I know this will help with maybe some of the calls and things I get that's not our jurisdiction. That's over in Weld County. So I know that's change is happening, and I see that's one of the things you do. So I know this is kind of off topic, but I think it's one of your current practices. How much work is that for you all, and how much will it be with the new changes? Do we have any idea how that is impacted, and do we keep administrative fees for for executing that contract, and what does that look like?
So that contract will be coming to you in the next month or so. I just reached out to my counterpart at NOCO Humane to get that process going. But when we met with them back in the summer, our fees won't be impacted by any way, stretch, or form with the Weld County folks coming this way. So we shouldn't see an impact with that, Commissioner. As far as time, we get a lot of barking dogs. We get a lot of, and it's really nice for us now to be able to just say, hey, Rigo, can you help us with this? So the relationship has been easy. They actually helped with one of the cases that Chad was dealing with up north where we had the brand inspector, and I thought that was only in Yellowstone, right? But we had the horse brand inspector up with Chad one morning and the Humane Society. So it's more a partnership rather than causing us any work.
I figured it was, but I just wanted to ask that question, question because it is a unique partnership, but a very valued one and important because, loose dogs, loose cows, like migrate into my yard, which I just know who to call. Hey, your cows are eating my garden again. Wonderful family, but these are rambunctious cows. And so I know that's really important. So I just wanted to ask real quick on that. So I want to go back to your questions. I guess I'll just tackle the business, legal businesses. I think this is as you say, there's lots of them popping up, and it's a fairness issue to me as well, right? We have a lot of businesses who follow the right processes and doing the right thing, and to me, it's also a fairness issue. I get people who call, and when I first read, well, why does this person get away with this for 20 years? And I had one trailer that I had to park overnight, and I get a call and I get a violation, and those kinds of things, right? And I said, I don't know, I'll ask, but it's a fairness issue for me as well. We have people that follow the procedures and the process and the statutes and all those things, and then we have folks that don't, and I feel like that has to be some fairness and some accountability. I'd like to maybe understand and digest this business registration program. I know I've heard other counties talk about it. I think it might be nice to just think about this. There's folks who, it happens around, because I live in, I think this impacts kind of me as a resident, as also a commission, the one that lives in unincorporated Limerick County. I see these all the time. I drive through and they're in my neighborhood, right? And I know the county's been responsive, and I just try to, just put my blinders on because I can't, see, and it's because it's people don't know sometimes the rules, and I think sometimes maybe having a licensure maybe would help with education as well, you know what I mean, and help with education and compliance, and maybe also it's maybe more upstream work to help you all not have to deal with the dozens of calls and people complaining later. So it's kind of, do we get upstream and, but you're right, we don't get money for it, we can't charge, and then it's cost, we have to pay a person. So I think I need to kind of think about that and maybe digest that a little bit more and look at some numbers and talk about that. But it's certainly something that I've seen for a long time. And I see it all driving up and hiking and things and an issue. So I do know we've had conversations with that CCI priority. I think we had, the last 5-6 days has been an absolute massive blur because it's been so packed, long days. We had that CCI priority meeting, and I think we did have a discussion. One of the priorities was for code compliance or writing tickets, and I don't remember all the details, but it sounds like that would be something to kind of understand how that impacts what we're trying to do too.
Yeah, Shane forwarded that to us, and I let all the inspectors read through it. It would be helpful, but it would also be a big change and a big implementation to get another level of a board. But in theory, we thought it would be helpful. In practice, it would be a big task.
Well, certainly would love any insights or comments or points you'd like me to have as I'm having conversations, for we can help
Okay.
make sure we don't have unfunded mandates and things that make things harder for our already, obviously, we're considered a peer, a best practice by our peers. We don't want to undo some of the things we worked so hard to
Right.
get to where today. So I would be curious about that. And then I think it's fantastic we have the building code violations during the planning process. I think that's really, to me, makes common sense, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. I was taking a tour of the Boys and Girls Club today in Loveland. It's doing the renovations that are trying to open up, and they're going to quadruple the amount of childcare spaces. And they were just talking about how if they could just get all these things aligned in the different, the electricians in this and the inspectors, they could really, if they could get all aligned, they could, save them money and also
Yeah.
have less, disruption. And so I said, well, that makes sense, but I'm sure that is almost near to impossible. But it was something that they were asking about. And I realized I was there to learn, but also because they had to ask at the end, of course. And then I'm wondering how this probably saves you time and money and maybe staffing anyway, because you're wrapping this all up into one process that's got to save efficiencies, as you said. And so, but it still costs, because it sounds like a lot of work, and it sounds like we put a lot more work in this to everybody. So I do support kind of raising those fees, and because it should be people that are using this, again, a fairness issue, right? Because I agree with my colleague that people that are going to make a financial benefit out of some of these, we've had a lot more of those than recent. They're benefiting from these changes, and I think it's important that, it doesn't cost our department, and it takes away from other resources, because that's something that they're looking to do. So I think that's important, and I support that. And I'm sure you have your numbers and things. And almost wondering if we should think more upstream and maybe have it more up. It sounds like we're trying to get up to where we're at. Maybe we think about going one more step. And so we don't have to change this again in 2 years, or maybe we should have something. So this is for the next 3 to 5 years we're up, because this is a lot of work to get back to have this conversation, and maybe we need to be more forward thinking. And that's kind of what I'm wondering is, it sounds like a lot of these are just to get caught up to where we could be like head above water now, and wondering if we should, or maybe nose above water, and maybe we should try to get at least the shoulders above. And so that's what I'm wondering about. That's how I feel like today. I at least got my nose is above water and my chin, so that's about it. And I'm sorry, Commissioner, I know you had a question and more questions. I want to just kind of get through these. Certainly, absolutely support the revised code compliance priority ratings. I think that helps, because there's just, you guys could all work 7 days a week, 24/7, and I still don't think you catch up. But I'm just, it's not on you all, it's just the amount of volume is just, and the complexity is, I can't even imagine. So I can, but I see it, but also I don't know. I'm just grateful for all of you. You guys do a lot of work. And I think, did I get all the questions? I think I have covered them all.
I believe so.
Okay. And then, is there any, I keep hearing that we're kind of an exemplar, we're doing a lot of things right, but you talked about Summit County. Can you remind me of that again? Because
So Summit County is the one that,
the filing, yes.
Yes.
I support that. When we bought not the home we have currently, but the first one we bought in Larimer County, they had built the basement, everything without all the permits, and then we had to do a lot of work, and it cost us, but we just wanted to make sure, wanted to be in compliance, because we bought it as is, and it wasn't caught on the inspection for some reason, and we bought the house, but then we were stuck with all of that, and so I certainly support that. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's just reality, and I wish, it wasn't so, but it is, so.
Cool.
Thank you. So I do think that's important as well, because a lot of these were like older pipes that should have been caught and fixed a long time ago and didn't, and I would not want to hand over a house that was not
Right.
safe for others. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Kafalis, thanks for your patience.
Thank you for the opportunity to collect my thoughts. And I have one overarching question, and then I think I can quickly go through the various topics. My overarching question is, given our budget uncertainties and with those proposed policy changes that require staffing changes, have you all considered a prioritization? Well, if we had to do things incrementally, what would be most important to do? If you have not thought about that, I would ask you to take that back to your shop and give that some thought.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and comment that's helpful in our thinking. I think we are hoping that some of these conversations will help us determine where the commissioners sit in terms of priorities to then help us calibrate the resources we do have toward those greatest priorities. So for example, when we talk about looking at our priority rating system, by further nuancing that system or coming up with a refined list of priorities, it may result in things that we work on now falling off the list of high priority. It may be that in order to accomplish some of these efficiencies or new operational practices, we need to stop doing some things that we are doing now unless we have some additional resources. So there's some conversations ahead of us on what those priorities, really what should code compliance be most focused on? What is the core of our work? What are the highest priority types of cases and types of work? And then from there, evaluating if we're resourced to support those items. So it's in some ways a question of, more staff or not. We could do more with more staff, and a question of, are we using the staff that we have in a way that best matches those priorities that you all have?
Thank you. That's very helpful. And so, moving right along, Madam Chair, number 8, updating the fee structure. Yes, it makes sense to charge additional fees according to, to help cover our costs. Number 7, regarding the priority rating system, yes, of course. And I think in particular that type B, to create those subcategories perhaps, that might help, clarify, might help our current staffing requirements. On number 6, building code violations during the planning process, a question I have that maybe can be answered today or when we get together is, if we were to say that you couldn't move forward in the land use review process until you fix the building code violations, how would that impact the planning review process, approval process? Because it seems like sometimes we get criticized that some of these things take too long. So that's a question that I have. I mean, intuitively, I think it makes sense, and it provides an incentive for folks to fix what needs to be fixed before they can move forward. But will that delay things in a way that might create some unintended consequences? Does that make sense, colleagues?
Yes, it makes sense, Commissioner. And I don't know what the answer to that question is, other than we think you can work simultaneously on the building permit. You can't apply for it, but you could be hiring the electricians, you can hire the plumbers, you can do that during the planning process. And then it hasn't held up for the short-term rentals. We've found it very, very helpful for the short-term rentals. So they get the planning approval, and then they go over to the building and get the change of occupancy from a short-term or from a single-family residence to the short-term rental. And if there was any unpermitted work before they can get their certificate of occupancy, they have to finish that unpermitted work.
And does that apply to as-built permits? Because oftentimes when we get our land use proposals, your agency does the research, and you determined that they're at a violation for this and this and that, and they need to fix it. So are we suggesting that until they fix it, there's a pause in the land use process, or Can you help me understand that?
Yes, so for the short, that is exactly the process.
Term, I get that.
Yeah.
What about all the other stuff?
We've not done it that way, so we don't really know the impact, but we're thinking that if there's some sort of leverage that we can exert on folks, they would get it done rather than just letting it sit out there. Because once the planning process is done, again, they think they've got everything taken care of when actually there's more that needs to get taken care
I don't
of.
think it would unnecessarily delay the land use review process.
I don't think it would.
Well, that might be something for further, a little bit more detail.
I do think that highlights a tension in priorities. If the priority is streamlining the planning processes more than they are currently streamlined now, so shortening the length of time that the planning processes take. And I know this is a conversation as it relates to affordable housing in particular right now, which is not where we're likely to see as many of the as-built violations and things like that. But if there's a goal to reduce the amount of time in the entitlement process, this type of practice could impact the speed of that process. It does add an additional process, an additional step with additional weeks of review and hiring of contractors and things like that. If the priority is bring properties into compliance more effectively and address issues as they arise at the point in time when we have the leverage, then this would be very effective in doing that. So there could be a tension there.
Thank you. Moving right along, maybe give me 1 more minute, and if we can talk afterwards.
Yep.
Business registration, I'm curious, apparently in our land use code, it's, quote, encouraged. Given that, how's it been working? And how would that, if we changed it to required, that's going to require more staff to somehow enforce it. I guess, how's it working now with voluntary, and how would we, what are the details of how we would actually get all these businesses to register?
Yeah, it would be daunting, but right now we don't.
Okay.
I can't remember the last business registration, home occupation registration that came in.
Okay, then I think that merits further discussion. Business registration, voluntary, addressing illegal businesses, yeah, that's another one of those that probably we should talk a little bit more about. It seems like we shouldn't be overreaching, being harsh, but if there's a life safety issue, that's a different matter perhaps. Utilizing, yes, I support totally the, if it's a verified violation, that it should be made available when there is a potential real estate transaction. Last one. Thank you, Madam Chair. Legal enforcement. The stipulated agreements make sense, and the other one about allowing for code compliance folks to issue summonses, is that up for discussion?
It's not. We have talked with the sheriff's office previously, not with Sheriff Fan, but the county attorneys also, we worked with David Arow with that a couple years ago, and it was encouraged that we not pursue that path.
Okay. Well, maybe next time, when we get together, we could talk about, I think one of the points in the report was that we typically refer to the courts for an injunction. The more complicated cases, and it's typically not the smaller ones, and there's a consideration for somehow including those. We can talk about that when we get together. That is all I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Wanted to see if Commissioner Stevens had anything else. Otherwise, I'm going to have ask Lorinda to see if she had anything she wanted to add, or.
I guess the only thing that hasn't really been discussed, and I know you all will talk about this individually, but the prioritization of those Class B cases, I guess we'll call them. Is that something you want to start sooner than later? How much direction do you need to do that? That feels like an administrative kind of thing.
That's correct, Lorinda. We have already started on it because we thought that you all would be supportive of that. And so what we would like to do is finish that work and then come back at a Monday afternoon work session and share what we've come up with.
Sounds good to me. Commissioner Cavallis, go ahead.
One other thing for consideration, there's no reference in here to ag-related interests And I know we've made some strides with trying to clarify building code expectations, but at least from particular ag folks, there still seems to be some issues there, but I don't,
Let's visit about that
very good.
moving forward, yeah.
Of course. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner. So I just wanted to, again, thank you all. This is, a lot of work went into this, a great job. I know we have to have some more conversations, but appreciate you all and the work that you do. And this is something I think it will help. It will help us with the folks that have concerns about, violations, and help the folks that we're trying to help work through the process and help resolve these things. So, and, we have amazing staff. I want to make your jobs.
And if I may, I meant to say this earlier, but Hannah Supas was very instrumental in gathering the data for us and doing the graphs, so I just want to formally recognize that.
Well, thank you, Hannah. Appreciate it. Well, at 2:31, we are adjourned. Thank you all. And thanks for joining us today.